Well, hello, my friend. Welcome to Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit. I'm your host, Una Duncan, and today we have a very special guest. In fact, I think you might even recognize him by his voice. Check it out. That's right. It's the Swedish chef from The Muppet Show. Does anyone else remember being a little kid watching The Muppet Show? And you knew that that was the Swedish chef, but you had no idea what the word Swedish meant. So you just thought that meant like silly chef or something like that. Anyway, I'm so sorry to break your heart because the Swedish chef is not our special guest today. But think about this. Doesn't he sound happy? And he probably is because people from Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark are consistently identified as the happiest people on the planet. Our real special guest today is Tim Rayborn, who wrote the Scandinavian Guide to Happiness, as well as almost 50 other books. Tim has a PhD from the University of Leeds, and he writes about music, art, history, the strange and unusual, mythology, and health and wellness. Today, he's going to teach us why Scandinavian people are so happy and how we can integrate some of these principles into our lives, no matter where we live.
It's time to get your head out of your ass and start creating a life of no regrets. Whether you want to lose weight, get rich, or manifest a hot threesome on the beach, you're gonna want to turn this up. This is Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit with your host, best-selling author and professional butt kicker, Una Duncan.
Okay, so Tim Rayborn, thank you so much for being here right now.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So what made you want to write the Scandinavian Guide to Happiness?
Well, my publisher asked me to do it.
The ultimate author's motivation. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. They wanted me to do it and they paid me to do it, which was great. But no, it's I work with a couple of different publishers on call, and I often get requests to do things that are suited to my interests. So it's a great situation to be in. This particular publisher puts out a variety of different kinds of books, lifestyle and health books and such, and they knew about my interest in sort of Scandinavian culture and such, and it seemed like a good fit. So that was the main reason. So when I knew about some of the concepts within it, but it was really fun to start delving into it in more detail and finding out, more about these. What does that even mean? The Scandinavian Guide to Happiness. Well, we continually look at happy polls and like happiest countries in the world, and routinely year after year after year, the number one countries are Finland and Denmark and Norway and Iceland. And you think these are often very remote, very cold, very dark countries. And people were like, but why would they be the happiest? But routinely, their people are some of the happiest and most well-adjusted in the world. So what is it about them that makes them so happy, so content all of the time? So it was really fun for me to delve into that. And like, what is it about their psyche, about their mental health, about other things that makes this kind of level of almost like a societal contentedness that they all seem to have? And you can't stereotype, obviously. There's homelessness, there's problems there as well. But overall, there's a level of satisfaction and contentedness with life in those countries that's kind of rare in a lot of other places. So I was real keen to sort of delve into that and kind of just explore why, and then offer up a book for people who don't live there to bring some of those principles into their lives as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what did you learn? What were some of the big principles that you learned?
Well, the book, the way I've done the book is it's arranged by different concepts, and I have my copy here because there's no way I'm going to rattle it off the top of my head. But there are several different concepts. There's Lagom, Friluftsliv, Fika, Hygge, Lycka, Sisu, and Theta Redast, and these are all different concepts of living in different countries. So I can talk a little bit about each if you like and what they represent, or whatever, however you want to do it.
Yeah, well, first let me congratulate you on what to my Canadian ear sounds like a great Scandinavian accents.
Practice.
Perfect. Well, yeah, let's do that. Let's start with the
Sure.
Swedish principle of Lagom. I'm sure I'm saying that right.
Yes.
Wrong. What is Lagom and how does that make us happier?
All right, let me find. I will actually give you a few little quotes from the book. It's the easiest way to do it. So lagom in Swedish means literally just the right amount. Not too much, not too little. It's almost like the Buddhist concept of moderation in all things. It's not excess, it's not depriving. It refers to the wisdom of moderation. There's a Swedish proverb that says literally that, the right amount is best. And the idea is to keep things in balance and not give in to excesses in any area of life. So the idea is, don't drink too much, don't eat too much, but at the same time, don't deprive yourself either. It's the middle way of Buddhism. It's very similar to that. I find that idea of enjoy yourself and be content, but don't go to extremes, either extreme indulgence or extreme asceticism. Neither of those are going to benefit you, and they're actually going to make you very unhappy in the long term. So that's one of the first principles we find.
Yeah. And just to interrupt you, I can see how that totally applies to, alcohol or sweets or whatever. But I think you said that this principle extends to even our relationships, our
I
health, our
think so.
home.
Yeah, I think so. I think when you look at certain things, it's like being willing to unplug from work at the end of the day. Don't bring your homework with you. You
Right.
don't work home. Like that's your job or whatever your job, even if you work at home at 5 o'clock or whatever, cut it off. Don't be taking phone calls at 10:38, PM. That's not moderation. That's not Lagom. That's living for work rather than working to live. It's things like that. Make time for sleep. Don't deprive yourself. Don't sleep 12 hours, but also don't sleep only 4 hours. Try to get healthy amounts of sleep. Physical activity, do it, but don't do it to excess where you're in the gym for 4 hours a day, because that's going to leave you burning out as well. So there seems to be a real strong sense of this particular idea, and it works across all sorts of things. Give yourself a day off once in a while. Disconnect properly when you're on vacation. Don't take work calls. Don't doom scroll on social media. Leave it away. So these things that are actually easier said than done. We've created this workaholic mentality that if you're not killing yourself constantly all the time, that you're not productive. There's a deep streak of that in the United States, in particular, what I like to call sort of work or political Calvinism. It's the idea that you have to earn your right to exist every day by pushing yourself harder and harder and harder. And it's taking us back to almost these sort of Victorian values about hard work. And it's literally killing people. And I think this is one of the things you find in the Scandinavian countries, and even in some others, Germany and France as well. In France, they'll take 2 hour lunches. That's not you'll sit down with a bottle of Bordeaux and have a 2 hour lunch, and you don't go back to work until after that's done. They have 35-hour work weeks. There's a greater sense of work-life balance. And I think that this is something that we see a lot in the Scandinavian countries from what I've seen as well in my time spent there. So yeah, that's one of those. It literally translates across all of society. It's not just don't drink too much alcohol. It's don't do too much of anything, really.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. I mean, you're mentioning the workaholism, but I think there's this go hard, go home attitude that is so prevalent. And I don't know if you know what I do. I do health and fitness counseling and coaching. So, and that's one of the biggest things is that people, even when it's a good thing, they feel like they have to do it so hard. I got to do my exercise every single day. I have to eat so clean. And, or if it's a bad thing, if it's sugar or alcohol or, gluten or whatever, and they're like, never again. And I really think that creating those polarities, it doesn't do anyone any favors.
Absolutely. I think the more you try to resist something, the harder it becomes to resist. If you just say, I'm never having any sugar again, excuse me, as long as I live, that's not going to work. You're going to be into that bag of cookies in about a day and a half. That's the way it is. So it's learning to moderate that sort of thing is hugely important. Yeah. Yeah.
And this idea of Lagom, of just enough, not taking too much, not doing too much, it seems to sort of align with the Nordic economic model of social democracy.
Yes, so absolutely. The ocean billionaires are not even allowed in those countries. The idea, because why does one person need to hoard that much money? They don't. They're never going to use it. They can't spend it. They couldn't spend it in 300 years, literally. And so there is that sense of the kind of social democracy of the greater good of people means that kind of excess should not exist. And that's absolutely essential, I think, to the social structure and political and economic structures of those countries.
This podcast is sponsored by my health and fitness company, but I'm going to let someone else tell you about that.
Before I joined the MFA, I was mostly sedentary. I knew I would feel a lot better if I took control of the rest of my bad habits and ate to support being stronger. My identity changed to that of a healthy MFer. I got my habits in line. As a result, I quickly lost 70 pounds in 7 months. It has undeniably changed my life for the better. And the magic is really in Una's no bullshit style. If there is magic, it's in taking control of your own life and being a grown-up and doing what you know you're supposed to do. And Una and the community helped me do that. Give it a chance.
Yeah, so what do you think? I mean, this is probably the big question, but what do you think came first, the cultural attitude or the economic model?
That's an interesting thing. I think it's a bit of both. I think that the attitude probably, and a case with a lot of these, comes from the fact that in previous centuries, prior to wonderful things like indoor plumbing and central heating, they could be pretty harsh, miserable places to live, and you have to rely on the community to survive. Rugged individualism isn't going to cut it. You don't go off and conquer the North Swedish wilderness. You die and get eaten. Your corpse gets eaten by a bear. I mean, that's it. So you better have a community, a village, a community of people to rely on. There's a greater sense of collectivism, of communitarian, just being good neighbors. That sort of thing is absolutely essential. So I think that idea was already ingrained in the Nordic psyche before these, and therefore these economic models fit that idea. I don't quote me on that. I don't know, but that seems to be my case. That it's that probably the ground was fertile for that kind of economic development because the attitude was probably already there. So yeah,
that sounds like as good a guess as any to me. Yeah. Okay.
We'll
So
not die on that
speaking of,
hill, but I think it's probably true. So
it's a great guess. Okay. So speaking of getting eaten by a bear, let's move to Friluftsliv. I know I've got that wrong. Tell me how to say it properly.
Let's see. Friluftsliv, which literally means, it's a Norwegian term, and I'm actually studying Norwegian right now, so I have fun with this. It means free air life, which is it's kind of one of those words that's a little strange, but it actually refers to the fulfillment that one gets being out in the natural world. And the Nordic, particularly Norway, are huge on outdoor sports or just hiking or anything all year round. They have the joke in Norway, of course, is that there is no bad weather, there's only bad clothing, which is true in a lot of northern areas of the country. But yeah, people love their outdoor sports, and it's not even necessarily skiing and mountain climbing, just like hiking and walking and such. And people love being out in all kinds of weather. So the contentment that comes with reconnecting with being outside is something that's very important to the Norwegian consciousness, I think. And even people that live in Oslo and big cities will find ways to get out because you're never far from nature. The public transportation is so good and such, and the cities are not large sprawls like Los Angeles. So it's possible, even if you live in an apartment in the middle of Oslo, you can be out in the countryside in half an hour. So there's always a great sense of wanting, and many of those cities are also renowned for having beautiful parks and all sorts of areas. So the idea is to kind of find yourself, get lost and find yourself again in nature, I think is what it really stands for. So, and we know that this, there have been all sorts of studies. I think I quoted one in here from 2015 reported that over 50% of the world's people now live in urban areas. Urbanization is associated with rising rates of mental illness and stress because it's just we spent hundreds of thousands of years living in the natural world, and then we lock ourselves away from it in concrete buildings. Of course, we're going to start feeling like we're jailed. We need the rough ground under our feet. We need to touch the trees. We need to breathe that air because it's literally in our bodies. It's literally what we evolved to become. So I think that the attitude here is that we need to reconnect with that much more than we do.
Yeah. And this principle, it's not, as I read it in your book, it's not so much about like hiking and skiing. It's actually more just about being in nature. You don't have to do anything to it. You don't have to do anything in it.
Yes. Yeah, go sit under a tree for half an hour and just listen to the birds. That's fine. It's not going out and buying expensive ski equipment, and you can do that if you want, but that's not the if you just go to your local park and spend a little time each day or every other day or whatever, listening and observe it changing throughout the seasons as well. Every season and every time has its own beauty if you allow yourself to be open to it.
And I think this is even supported in law in Norway.
Yeah, both Norway and Sweden have what they call, you can go anywhere as long as you don't damage the property. Britain has a similar law as well. It means you can, the concept of ownership is a little bit more collective. Yes, people own land, but they have to leave it open for people that want to go hiking or walking. They usually have a path across a part of it. And I used to live in Britain, and I used to walk quite a lot. And there's almost always places you'd get to farms and such, and there's big fields. And as long as you sort of cross over the fence and you stay to the edge, you're allowed to walk along it until you get to the other side, and then you're passing somewhere else. So the Brits and also the Norwegians and Finns take this very seriously, and people have proposed trying to limit it in the past, and it's practically led to rioting because they don't want to be hemmed in. We in the United States, certainly there is such a concern about this is my land and private ownership and all, get off, and there's like so much of that mine. But again, it's that sense of collectivity. There's a sense of like, this is for all of us, just don't cause any damage, don't harm it, and it's very important to them, these right to roam laws.
That's so interesting. I had a little experience of that. So my family has a cottage on a lake in Ontario, and it's on a little island. There's about 14 cottages on it. And when we bought it in the 90s, there was a trail that went all the way around the island, but it passed like, right through people's, front porches kind of thing. So you'd be on your dock and sunbathing or whatever, and people would walk by and they'd say, "Oh, hi, where do you live?" Whatever. But then people started to buy their lots, and they were like, "No way do I want people walking past my private little idyllic cottage situation." And now the trail is gone and there's nowhere to walk. So
Right.
you're kind of stuck on your own little parcel of land. And so, yeah, it's just my experience of when we don't have those protections for right to roam. I think that's what it's called, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And who is that? Who is that helping, really? A few selfish property owners have made it miserable for everybody else. And no one's harming them by doing that, and it's like, if you really need that much privacy, sure, go buy something far more remote out somewhere. It's
Right.
don't ruin it for everybody else just because you're a selfish jerk, and we see so much of that. So yeah, I think that the Nordic countries have definitely balanced that right in a way of like, yes, use these spaces, get out of, don't harm anything, and it's all fine and everyone's fine with it. So again, there's that sense of collective. This is good for the collective. This is good for everyone. This is something that benefits everyone's health. It benefits everyone's well-being and such. And I think that the free life air is very much about that. It's about everyone should be free to live and explore life out in the fresh air, literally, is what it means. Yeah.
And, when a lot of people think, "Oh, I'd love to get out in nature more often, but I just don't have the time." You
Yeah.
told a story about a Norwegian island that declared their island a time-free zone. Did I read that
I think
right?
so. I don't remember all the details, but yeah, it was
Yeah.
something like, time didn't apply. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so now I want to move on to
Sure.
Hygge, which again, I'm sure I'm getting that wrong. Tell me how to say it.
Hygge.
Hygge.
Yeah.
So I think hygge has been all the rage since the pandemic,
It
but
has,
maybe you can just
absolutely.
define it for us, anyone who's missed this hygge trend.
Hygge is a Danish phenomenon, and it was in the news a few years ago. It kind of became this big thing, and I think you're right. Actually, the pandemic and people being trapped at home. Hygge, basically, it's a Danish word that means comfort. Really, it means comfort, simplicity, and comfort, and it's all about making your home a comfortable place to live, whatever that means to you. There is no right or wrong way to do it, but it's about things that will make it your safe haven, your place, not just the place where you eat and sleep, but the place that you actually want to inhabit. And again, when we were stuck home, during the early days of the pandemic, then people started investigating this, like, how, if I'm going to be here for 24 hours a day, how can I make this more, a place that I want to be? And that's
Yeah.
where I think it really took off. But it's a time-honored Danish practice. Again, you're looking at places like Denmark. It gets dark very early in the winter months. So how to make it comfortable? Well, candles and a nice atmosphere and nice foods and things can make those nights very, very comfortable. And it's about being comfortable in your environment, but also enjoying comfort with friends, comfort with family, comfort with your pets, whatever makes you, the idea is basically to make your home the most comfortable place possible, whatever that means. And again, it does not mean that you need to spend thousands of dollars, getting all the fancy candles and blankets and pillows and everything else. It's what is going to make this place a little refuge for you, a haven for you. And I think, that's something that really appealed to people during the early days of the pandemic. So yeah, that's a very good observation as to why it probably caught on. It's good for it's like these other things. It's good for your mental health. If you have a place that you want to come home to that feels like a refuge, that feels safe, it's going to help you sleep better. It's going to help you feel better about, problems and things. Knowing you always have a place to come back to is very important to Danish healthy psychology. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that when, back in pandemic days, we started seeing all these beautiful coffee table books that are called hygge or whatever.
Yeah.
I thought it was more of a like decor thing, extra pillows and some candles and
Yes.
whatever. But in reading your book, I understood that it's actually more about feelings of safety, of sharing, of thankfulness, of friendship and closeness. It's much more than just like, let's add 4 more pillows to your couch.
Yeah, and all the luxury candles you can. That's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, you can certainly do that if you want to create ambiance by decorating parts of your house with nice candles and such. That's great, but it really is about that creating a safe space for yourself, really, and your family or your friends or whatever. So yeah. Yeah.
So for some people, hygge could be, I don't know, having extra pantry supplies, or it's other feelings of safety, I suppose,
Sure,
right?
whatever,
Or
whatever.
closeness.
Maybe you're an avidly into knitting and you have an adequate supply of yarn so that you never run out. Maybe,
Right.
you want to build a comfortable, cozy little nook for your dog or your cat. There's things that whatever is going to make you happy. Maybe there's certain types of foods you love and you always want to keep them in stock so that you never run out. It can be very
Mm.
simple things like that. Maybe you buy a 10 pack of tea lights and just put them up, and it makes it nice because it illuminates the corner of the living room nicely. That costs $1.50. It's
Yeah.
not. Yeah, it doesn't have to be any elaborate thing. Sure, you could go all out and completely redo your house, but that's not necessary, and that's kind of missing the point. One of the things about
Yeah.
Hygge is also simplicity. Like maybe it's better to reuse what you have, or get something on a buy nothing site, or buy something at a thrift shop that's really special and meaningful, rather than going out and just buying the latest fanciest thing because it looks nice. It's often the more homespun rustic things can actually add to the effect. So.
I mean, that's kind of a through line of the book, isn't it? That none of these things really cost a lot of money.
Hmm. Not at all. It's about an attitude. It's about an internal attitude adjustment more than it is about spending external things. You could do almost
Yeah.
anything in this book without spending more than $10 to $20, to be perfectly honest. So it's
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that a guide to happiness, like there's no like travel or, have a fancy or have aspirational big accomplishments.
right.
It's all quite humble and simple, isn't it?
And I like that. I think that is nice. One of the things about Hygge is, yeah, you don't have to get the promotion. You don't have to be the company vice president. You don't have to you can be content in the world that you've created for yourself, as long as everything in it makes you happy. And it's not about, as you say, it's not about aspirations and goals. You can still have those. That's fine, but they shouldn't take over your life. There should always be a kind of remember your roots, remember what really brings you happiness. It's the spark joy thing. It's what deep down makes you happy, because a lot of those trappings, and we've heard this time and time again about people winning lotteries and such, and then just sort of peeing it all away in about 10 years and they're left with nothing, or they go out and they buy a fancy house and a $100,000 car and they're still miserable, the $10,000 Rolodex, because none of that, that's not about them. The problems in them are still there, and that's no car or watch is going to make that go away.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this seems like a great segue to Luca.
Yeah, it's about the idea of happiness, and it's about finding happiness in simple things, in daily pleasures and such. It's not about happiness doesn't come from buying the most expensive watch. It doesn't come from taking the most expensive trip, but happiness can be sharing a cheap bottle of wine with your friend on a Friday night and talking until 2 a.m. and that's costing nothing, and you're getting memories and such. It's about valuing those things that really matter, whether that's friends, families, whether it's a cat that sits in your lap and purrs while you read, whether it's a piece of music that you love listening to, things that are simple but move you in simple ways. And I think that's maybe it's about one of the things that makes people happy that we've shown over and over again in studying is volunteering time to help others. Is there absolutely does cause physiological changes in the brain when we do things for others. When we try to make other people happy and improve their lives, it dramatically improves our mood. And this has been shown in study after study after study that it's not all about you acquiring, it's also about what you can give back. So is there an organization you believe in that you could volunteer for? Is there an animal shelter you could help out with? There's so many different things. Again, they take a little bit of time, but they won't cost you anything. And the benefits that you'll get from internal, I think, peace and feeling better are substantial. And this is backed up by absolutely solid science in numerous studies.
Yeah. Can you tell us about the free help guy?
What was that?
Do you remember the story? Maybe I'll tell you what I remember, and you tell me where I'm getting it wrong. There was somebody, and so now I maybe Denmark, who advertised his services and basically just said, "Hey, I'm the free help guy. I'll help you with whatever. Here's my email address." And people started emailing him saying, "Hey, can you help me figure out how to write a presentation? Hey, can you help me hook up my VCR or whatever?" And he just he helped people move. He helped people with their homework, and he just started helping people. Is that the story that I remember?
Yeah, thousands of people, and it kind of caught on, and other people started doing it too. So it became like this whole network of people helping people and doing things. And it's fantastic. I absolutely love that idea. Yeah.
So
what do you need help with this afternoon? I'm free for 2 hours. If anybody needs something, hit me up. What a great idea. The idea of being a good neighbor again, being, conscious of your social surroundings and helping in whatever way you can. It's a fantastic idea. Yeah, I think he's helped thousands of people since then. Yeah, wonderful story.
Can I quote you from your book? You wrote, when this is so talking about
I admit to
Luca
nothing.
and Luca and the principle of happiness is all around you from Denmark. And so you start the chapter by saying, first, let's talk about Denmark. You describe it as a clean and modern country with excellent free healthcare and efficient public transportation, free education, and many other benefits that are bound to make people happy. So it's a chicken and egg. Do these things make people happy, or do happy people create institutions that serve the public good, thus spreading happiness?
Yeah. It's both.
Yeah.
I think it actually is both. And I think one feeds the other. I think there's, again, we have that collective, or I think that collective sense of collectivism was already there that laid the groundwork for these kinds of social and economic models. And then those in turn make people happy because of the way that they're set up. So I think it is, like you say, it is a chicken and egg question, but I think the temperament was already there. The psychology and the mindset was already there to kind of start these sort of social experiments and see, well, we already have this sense. Let's see if we can expand on it by codifying it into law and seeing how it works. And it's been spectacularly successful. Now, there are no countries without problems. Every country has issues with crime and homelessness and other things. But overall, the numbers are considerably less in a lot of these countries than elsewhere, simply because they find that these things work. If people have to be willing to buy into them too. If somebody goes into this kind of a country with the sort of rugged individualist, I've got mine, screw you attitude, that's not going to work. And they're not going to be very welcome, to be honest. And
No.
you'll be ostracized. You're not going to be happy, and you're going to be kind of shut out by people as well. So exactly.
You write that in Denmark and Iceland, 95% of people report a sense of belonging and community. And that really struck me because what I keep reading is that there is a growing sense of isolation among many people. So what are they doing differently? Would you say it's because of these sort of institutions that they've developed and this sort of culture of looking out for one another? Is that the big difference, or are there other cultural things that are contributing to this?
Again, I think you're right. I think there is this greater sense of collectivity that people buy into, and there's a greater sense of we have a responsibility to each other, and that's, especially again, because these countries have histories. Some of them have fairly fraught histories with a lot of violence and turmoil and political upheaval, but they've found a way through that. And then you're also dealing with like very extreme weather, particularly in places like Iceland, where it's like in the winter you have maybe an hour of sunlight, and
a volcano's erupting in your backyard.
Exactly. You better look out for your neighbor when one of those volcanoes with 17 syllables erupts, because it's a problem. You can have lava rolling down the middle of the town center. So you better be able to face up. In fact, there is an Icelandic principle, which we can talk about in a moment, that actually kind of refers to that as well. So, but I think so. I think there's a greater sense of a need to support the collective good over rugged individualism and such. And it pays dividends. It shows that people in general are happier. And, that's at the end of the day, that's what people really want. And that's all that really matters.
Okay. But this is interesting to me, because this idea of focusing on the collective good in some ways would seem like a contrast to the idea of individual freedom. And the principle of feeling free is actually one of the principles that you talk about here.
Right.
And you mentioned the Human Freedom Index, which ranks nations by the state of their freedom. And Finland, Denmark, they always score really high. And for example, China and Iran often score very low. Right. And you said the US is usually around 20th on the list. Yeah, and that was so surprising to me, because freedom is like the American brand. So
it depends on how you define freedom. That's the thing.
Okay, tell me more.
Freedom to make as much money as you want without any government interference, freedom to dump your trash in the river, freedom to play your music super loud at night. A lot of people think those things are freedom, but what if it's freedom? Okay, so here's the question. If you're working a 9-to-5 job, let's say you're paid well, you get $150,000 a year to work at some company, and that's great, that's fine, and you're working 9 to 5. But what are you doing on top of that? You have to commute there. You're leaving at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. You're not getting home till 6:30 at night. Well, that's another 2 hours of your day eaten up. So you've already given 10 hours of your day to this employer. Then you've got to find something to eat. Then maybe you have an hour or two. You've got to take care of other things. You have to do laundry. You have to do other things. Where's your freedom? Where's your time? Weekends have to be shopping
the
for
lawn
mowing the lawn, shopping for groceries, getting things for the kids. Where's your free time? Or would you rather live in a collectivist society, a more collectivist society where you have a 30-hour week, you get to work at home, you get unlimited time off for sickness? We don't have that here. Scandinavian countries get 6 weeks of vacation every year. We're lucky if we get 2 in the United States. We have no, in the United States, it's all privatized healthcare. One medical emergency can wipe you out. What's free about any of that? We are slaves to a horrific economic system that is making people sick and is killing them. Whereas people that have given up a little bit of that so-called freedom have actually opened up their time, they've opened up their health, they've opened up all of these things to live more fulfilling lives. There's, I think, how you define freedom is two very different things. And what a lot of Americans, I think of as freedom versus what they're actually getting is not a good deal, and they don't realize how bad they're getting it. And you'll see people in Britain and Germany and other places saying, "Yeah, we get 6 weeks of vacation a year. What are you telling me? You only get 10 days in the United States? That's ridiculous. Why are you working 50 hours a week? There's a mandated 35-hour work week in France, you know." So what's really free? Your time is the one thing that you can't get back. You can always make more money, but once you've spent that time, it's gone forever. And if you're spending 50 hours a week at the office, you're not free. Your time is bought up by them. And you're lucky if you have a little bit of time on the weekend to sit and read a book or watch a TV show that you want to watch. And then you have to go right back into the grind again. So I think it depends on how we define freedom, right up the top.
Yeah, a lot of those things, they seem like systematic.
Yeah.
And so I know you wrote this book because you want individuals to be able to take some of these principles and apply them to their lives. So how can an individual increase their sense of freedom within these structures that they may or may not be a part of, and therefore be more happy?
That's the tricky question, isn't it? That's the big question. Yeah. How, if you're living in a society that makes things difficult for you, how can you make them unburden those and make them more? And it's a really tricky question. I'm not sure there is actually a good answer to it. I think you can start by trying to apply some of these other principles about being content in your life and spending a little more time out in nature to sort of reset your own internal feelings. As is often said, we can't control events, but we can control how we react to them. And again, this is a very important principle. Is that's the only power we really have, is to control our reactions to other people, to other events, to political, to work, to anything that you can imagine. All we can do is sort of observe it and control how we react to it. And it's so easy to say and so difficult to do. But I think that's where it has to start, is that there has to be a change in how we react to things and how we're conditioned to react to things. And I think applying some of these principles in one's life, just the idea of simplicity, the idea of taking a moment, taking a breath, stopping, appreciating an hour with a friend, appreciating those things, over time can build up a greater sense of inner peace, of inner strength that allows you to then confront the less convenient aspects of society that we might be saddled with.
Well, that sounds like it's bringing us to the concept of sisu, which you have defined as courage, grit, and acting rationally in the face of adversity. Absolutely. And you suggested that maybe and this is a Finnish principle, that maybe the Finns developed sisu, well, for many reasons, but you tell a story about the Winter War. Can you tell us about the Winter War?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yes, in 1939, it was at the outbreak of World War II. The Soviets had the genius idea of trying to invade Finland in the winter, and they thought it was going to be an easy thing. They wanted to add Finland to their collection of satellite states, and the Finns weren't having it. The Finns were absolutely outnumbered, but they knew the terrain, and they were all expert skiers, expert winter sports people, and they went to work and carried out a campaign of guerrilla warfare against the Soviet army, absolutely destroyed them. Within 3 months, the Soviets withdrew and never came back. And it's a very powerful lesson. And we're seeing it kind of even in Ukraine as well. It's the same thing. They badly underestimated the Ukrainian resolve. Ukraine is a modern example of that in effect, that you're not going to do this. And we know that we may not succeed, but we're going to resist anyway. And so the Finns embody this sort of thing. And I think that's deeply rooted in the sense of having to survive in a very difficult environment. Finland is a gorgeous country, but it's also brutally cold in the winters, and having to have the sort of fortitude to be able to survive those, and to understand we may not have enough. Our food may run out in February. What happens then? Well, we'll make the best of it. We'll find a way. There is that resolve that is deeply, I think, etched into the Finnish, and even to a certain extent other Nordic and perhaps Russian psyche as well, that of making do and being able to put up with hardships. It doesn't mean that you have to be happy about it, but it means that you have to find a way to weather the storm until the storm passes. Yeah,
it's a really it's an interesting distinction, because on this podcast we talk about grit. But
Yes.
as I was reading, I don't think that the quality of sisu is I think it's a bit different than what us North Americans might think of as grit. So you
Interesting.
write, sisu is not finishing a marathon. It's the
Yes.
determination to put one foot in front of the other to begin with. It's facing a difficult situation without being certain of the outcome, but with the courage to face it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. It could be a daunting work project. It could be a health issue that you're facing. There's all of these things, that take that kind of fortitude that aren't easy. But then if you have these other things around you, we've talked about before, happiness, community, family, you're going to be more likely to be able to have the tools, the emotional tools, I think, to stand up to having that kind of fortitude to be able to face things. If you're isolated and scared and alone and not well supported, it's going to be much more difficult. So all of these things that come before this in the book kind of lead up to this, like having all of this background, having a safe place to be and having friends, having family, having a sense of connection with nature. That's going to give you a greater sense of inner stability for when difficulties arise. And difficulties always will arise. We don't get to live happy, charmed lives, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how can we individuals build up our sisu without necessarily having to tackle the Soviet army on skis?
Well, that was my first suggestion, but it's not. Yeah. Again, I think it's the idea is be good to yourself, be forgiving to yourself, know that you're going to stumble sometimes and fail. This idea that we have to succeed at everything we do, I think, is a really a terrible kind of Calvinistic bugbear that we need to get rid of. It's okay to try something and fail, or to try it 5 times until you get it right. There's this notion, certainly in the United States, of you've got to win, got to be number 1 all the time, got to win. Well, what if number 3 is okay? What if you try and you don't quite get there? I mean, it's almost like you see this with the Olympics recently. Well, there's the gold medal and then there's the losers. Well, no, the silver and the bronze are pretty awesome too. Just getting to the Olympics is unbelievably awesome. Like, most of us couldn't do any of the things that those people do, but we tend to denigrate that and only focus on the gold medalist. So, having that determination that you're okay with the outcome, whatever the outcome might be, it's difficult, but yeah, I think that's a place to start, definitely.
Yeah. And you're right. Also remind yourself, maybe this is part of being good to yourself, but remind yourself that sisu isn't constant.
Yes.
You're not always going to feel really strong in the face of adversity.
In fact, part of I would say it's almost a kind of not feeling strong can be the strongest thing you can do sometimes. Trying instead of putting on a false sense of, oh, everything's fine, I'm okay. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to break down and cry. That's sometimes the best thing you can do, and that's the strongest, healthiest thing you can do for yourself, rather than putting on a false face and saying, oh no, I'm good. Everything's fine. Don't worry about it. I got this. It's no problem. Now, most of the time we don't got this, and that's the thing.
We really don't. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the final Icelandic principle then. Thata redust. I'm sure I got that wrong.
Thata redust, which is it's kind of similar to sisu in some sense. It's basically whatever, it's fine. We can fix it. It's fine. We'll deal with it. When you live in a country where a lava may like wipe out your house, like, okay, we'll just build a new one. It's not fatalistic, but it's accepting that the world is the way that it is, and that we have to kind of roll with the punches, basically, go with the flow a little bit, be yielding, but then come back. If you're knocked down, get back up again. It's that determination of, and I love that. It literally translates as whatever, it's fine, which is great.
It is great. And you write down, it doesn't mean that everything always works out for the best or the way you want it to. It means that we can all make the best of bad situations.
And there will be bad situations. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What I like so much about that is that it's such an interesting contrast from the sort of spiritual but not religious mantra of everything happens for a reason.
Right. Or everything works out for the best. Yeah, that's always kind of bothered me personally. Everything absolutely does not work out for the best. So,
And we can handle it if it doesn't.
Yeah. Or the universe or God or whatever doesn't give you anything more than you can handle. I think that's nonsense. And I think it's actually, what people call toxic positivity. I think it's actually a bad thing, because it's, sometimes people do get a lot more than they can handle, but if they don't have things like that I talk about in this book of a community of friends, family, things to support them, it can be really bad, and they can get really dragged down. And then you're in the spiral of denying everything's fine. I've got this. I can deal with it, and I don't think that's healthy. So taking on this Icelandic philosophy of, this isn't great, but it'll work out. We'll figure it out, I think, is another way of putting it.
Yeah. If it's not great, that's okay too. I mean, we can't expect it to be great all the time. That's just the
Absolutely.
deal. Yeah.
And one of the things I mentioned it in the book is don't feel bad about feeling bad.
Oh, I
Sometimes
like
people
that.
feel bad about things and they beat themselves up or they feel guilty because they think they're supposed to take some sort of moral high ground or, oh no, I'm being spiritual. It's fine. It's like,
Mm,
no, it's okay to say this really sucks and I hate it and I feel terrible about that right now. And I'm not going to beat myself up about feeling terrible about that. That's a
right.
normal ebb and flow of human emotion. And it's much better to be okay with that and rather than to pretend that it's something that it isn't.
And to understand that although you can't change the situation, you can change your reaction to it.
Same
So
thing.
without
Yeah.
imposing toxic positivity, you
Yeah.
can accept the situation as it is and do whatever you can about it.
Yeah, yeah. What
Yep.
can you do? What is there? What can be done to fix it? What can we do? And you take things like that in bite-sized chunks. You don't look at maybe it's not looking at the whole picture. It's like, okay, right now in the next hour I can do this, and I'll deal with the rest of it when I get to that, to that point. So yeah,
One of the final things that you said about this particular principle is that you want to embrace life.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Because it's good and it's bad and it's weird and wonderful and that's what we have to do. We have to we are embodied beings breathing this air and living in this world and we have to be a part of it and it's not always going to go the way we want it to, but that's okay
Mm.
too.
Yeah. So, what was your biggest takeaway in researching this book? Everything from Lagom, the Swedish principle of everything in moderation, to Sisu, this kind of grit that's a little bit different than grit, and the nature stuff, and or the sense of community and interaction with others. And so, what was your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, it's interesting as I was learning about all of these. It really does point to the necessity of building, I think, stronger connections with people, whoever those people might be in your life. And it doesn't mean you have, I mean, some of us, I'm an introvert. I love spending time alone and being at home and whatever. That's fine for me. But I also understand the need for having strong family connections and having a group of friends and such. And I think that was one of the bigger takeaways that I had is that, and also the idea of, for me, the thing I think was most important is the making your home a safe refuge for yourself, wherever that might be,
Hmm.
if you're capable of doing that. It's not,
Hmm.
again, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, but if you can make it a place that really is your castle, then that's one of the best things you can do because then you'll be surrounded by that at all times when you're there, and it gives you a place to come back to, a place to really enjoy and come back to.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
love it. Well, Tim, tell us people where they can read more of your, I know you are an unbelievably prolific writer. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know a lot of people listening to this may have the goal of writing a book sometime.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Mhm.
Tim has accomplished that how many times?
Oh, I've probably written about 45 books over the last 10, 12 years, something like that. So I write professionally for various publishers. I also have things under my own name. I do ghost writing. I do a whole bunch of different things. And I provide coaching services if anybody is interested in learning about book writing or wants editing or ghost writing or any of those things or needs advice on how to get the whole process started. Yeah, I and my business partner do a business where we actually help people with those sorts of things. So be happy to do that.
Where could people follow you and learn more about your work?
You can go to timrayborn.com. That's fine. There's all of my books and my recordings and things are available there. I have a new book that just came out actually literally a week ago. It's
Oh,
on the same
congrats.
theme. It's called Northern Mythology, and it's a complete look at the Norse, Finnish, and Sami, who are the indigenous people of the far north, and their cosmologies, their religions, and such, dating back 1,000 years or more. So it kind of ties in, and you see some of the same themes, I think, in some of these stories about gods and heroes. There are elements of like Sisu and Lagom and those sorts of things in them. So you kind of see that there's like a deep-seated sort of sense of what the people of the region have long believed because it's present in their myths and in their stories and folk tales and such as well. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today about a book that you wrote a couple of years ago and have since
During the
turned out some
pandemic,
others.
I actually wrote
Oh,
it
good
during
for
the
you.
pandemic, which has made it an interesting sort of how do you experience community and all these things when everyone's at home? What can you do? So I actually talk about that a bit in the book as well. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
chatting with us today.
Real pleasure. Thanks so much.
So, what did you think of that? Does it make you want to move to Finland? Do you know what I find so interesting about Scandinavian happiness? The Scandinavian people that I know personally, which I understand is probably not like a representative sample or anything, but my Scandinavian friends, they're not like bubbly. They're not the ones that would immediately spring to mind if you said, who seems really happy? That would probably be like my fabulous gay guy friends who are basically like jazz hands about life. But it strikes me that jazz hands is not the happiness that Tim is describing in this conversation. He's describing moderation, quiet, boring social infrastructure. It's more about acceptance. And some of what he was talking about was kind of close to stoicism, which, to be honest, I have always dismissed as like boring and kind of a downer. But it actually feels like it takes some of the pressure off a little bit. I don't know. What do you think? I'd love to know. And if you want to build any of those very important social connections by sending this podcast to a friend, maybe send it to that stoic Scandinavian in your life, or anyone who could use a little bit of calm, quiet happiness, please do send it on. Until next week. Hey dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.